Virginia Hall, an amputee who went on to lead several men after infiltrating France while under Nazi control. Not only did she mastermind jailbreaks for over 12 secret agents, but she narrowly escaped being caught by climbing up a 7,500-foot mountain into freedom. Learn about all these details next on Technically a Conversation. Greetings, super friends. Welcome to another episode of Technically a Conversation. Here, we like to share an interesting topic with each other, which we recently learned about, and hope you find it interesting too. I'm one half of your host, Cisela. Joining me, as always, is the movie lover, Jose. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good. I only added the movie lover thing since...
We went to go see the Batman?
Yes, the Batman. How did you like it?
Vengeance.
Oh, that was a great line, by the way. You were like, fuck yes.
I loved it. I thought it was really great.
Yeah, it was definitely good. I agree.
I think of the standalone Batman movies, it might be my favorite, but I might need to watch it a couple more times just to make sure.
Okay.
But, I mean, Ben Affleck is still my Batman. He's still my favorite. But I really like how they focused on him being a detective, which is very comic accurate.
Right.
You know, the first Batman comics, they were called Detective Comics. They weren't called Batman. So, you know, I like how they took that step back and showed more of him solving cases and being a detective.
I didn't even know that. See, there you go. Drop him some knowledge already.
I'm a nerd, so I think it's my obligation to know these type of things.
That's funny. I really liked it. You know, it wasn't like the favorite that I've seen, but but there's so many good ones. So that's not to like poo-poo on it at all. It was just, there are so many freaking really good ones. Like The Dark Knight, I thought was really, really good. And also maybe there's like nostalgia involved with the older ones too. So I don't know. It could be battling a lot of things, but I know I'm already going to see it again with my team. So I'm going to get a second chance to like, okay, now I get to fully take it all in. So we'll see.
Cool. Yeah, my brother and the Genster, we were already talking about going to go see it again. So
no. Nice.
We're all excited to see it again.
Speaking of the Genster, I'm glad you said that. I needed to right or wrong, everybody. I wanted to shout out the Genster for giving me the name to research of Fannie Lou Hamer. Thank you, Jen. I should have actually mentioned you in that actual episode. I think I was so excited about getting the information out that just completely forgot. But remind me to buy you a beer next time.
Speaking of shout outs, we also have some shout outs for the Queens, Erica and Elena, and the Duke, Stephen B.
The Duke. I love that name. Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing our posts on your social medias. We do appreciate you getting the word out.
Yes. Thank you so much, guys. I swear this always helps. Your friends are our friends. Everyone, we are still looking for more favorable reviews. Thank you to those who have already given us their rave reviews. It really does help. You'll be entered into a contest to win your very own super sexy, Technically a Conversation t-shirt. And what do they have to do, Jose?
It's really easy. Just leave us a review. Send us a screenshot. We're at Greetings TAC on all the socials, and you'll be entered into our contest. And once we have those 25 reviews, we'll go ahead and do a drawing. All the deets are in the show notes or at technicallyaconversation.com.
Yes. Did you watch the most recent Bond movie?
I haven't seen any of the Bond movies.
Any of them?
No.
Oh, snap.
I know my dad loves James Bond, and he would always watch them. I mean, he watched them when I was a kid, so they only captured my attention for maybe like 30 or 40 seconds. And then I was the fuck out of there as quickly as I could get out.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I built a whole script all around having a conversation about that. Okay, wait.
I can probably appreciate it now as an adult because I have the attention span and the stories do seem interesting. But, you know, when you're a 6 or 7-year-old kid, you know, if there's no explosions or, you know, anything fun like that, you know, you usually aren't captivated long enough to sit and watch something.
No, I get it. Yeah. Did you at least hear that there's finally going to be like the first female Bond?
I've been hearing that there's a lot of rumors of who it's going to be because I've heard Henry Cavill is one of the people that they're thinking of, and Idris Alba is one of the people that they're considering.
No, yeah, she made an appearance on the last Bond, so you can see her there.
When they passed the torch?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, then I haven't.
I will say she looks pretty fucking badass, and I have to admit that although I'm glad they're doing it, I do feel like the audience would have been there a lot of years earlier before that, but hey, whatever, I'll take it. So now knowing that she's a woman, do you think you're going to go? Does it entice you anymore?
It entices me as much as all the other James Bonds.
Oh, so not at all. Great.
I'm joking. I mean, it definitely will be interesting to see somebody different take the mantle. It's just one of those type of things where I need to dedicate the time to sit down and start with episode 1 of James Bond and work my way up to number 37 or whatever they're at.
I haven't seen the early ones. Like, I never really saw like the Octopussy and all like those other things. Like, I didn't. So I think it's very Mission Impossible. You can kind of start anywhere and they don't have like carryover.
The only Mission Impossible one I've seen is the one with Henry Cavill because it's Henry Cavill.
Of course. Yeah. No, he's pretty. Está bonito.
He's my Superman.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's great. So let me ask you this. What do you envision when I say the word spy? This is all tied to our topic today.
Because somebody that lives a double life, in one sense of the word, they have to keep appearances with their family and their friends, and they're leading a totally different life as part of their career.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story about a woman's life, and very much like that, leading a double life and how she got there, because that is even pretty surprising. And the crazy intro fun fact I'll start is it's a woman and she had a wooden leg.
Oh, wow.
So that's already kind of interesting. So keeping with Women's History Month, we're going to learn about Virginia Hall. Have you heard of Virginia Hall?
I have not.
Oh, good. Okay, I was hoping you would say no. Shout out to super friend Elba, who suggested I listen to her story. Thank you, Elba. Her story was so inspiring that I thought I would share it with the entire world. Well, at least all of our listeners.
All of our super friends.
Yes, the world of super friends. All of this information came from primarily 2 places. It was a lecture that took place in the International Spy Museum. It's a link on YouTube. We'll have it in the show notes. It was a book referenced, A Woman of No Importance, The Untold Story of the American Spy Who Helped Win World War II by Sonia Pornell. And Jana Mendez, she was a former CIA chief of disguise who she was also in the lecture talking about Virginia. So it was those 2 ladies. And the second place is from the Espionage podcast. It was a 2-part series for Virginia Hall. Let's take a mental stroll through our meadows of knowledge and start back to Baltimore, 1906, when Virginia was born to a seemingly pretty wealthy parents. Virginia was raised on a farm with a bunch of animals like goats and sheep. However, her mother raised her to be a debutante, but her dad would take her hunting. So she kind of had the best of both worlds. Money was starting to go scarce, so her mom really wanted Virginia to marry a wealthy man to inject some cash flow back into the family. Her mom actually did something similar. Her mom was the secretary who married her boss, which is Virginia's dad. So this kind of social jump up the ladder was something that the mom hoped for Virginia as well. The problem is that Virginia didn't want that at all. She didn't want marriage. She didn't want babies. She kind of really loved just going hunting with her dad, and she was quite the tomboy. In fact, when she went to high school, it was said that she wore a bracelet made of live snakes once.
Oh, shit.
Isn't that weird? Your face was classic. Almost wish it was recorded. You were like, what? She wanted a career. She loved traveling abroad. She learned about 5 to 6 different languages. She knew French, Spanish, Russian, Italian, German, and she studied in 7 different universities, both here in the U.S. and abroad. And out of all the countries that she went to, France was her favorite, specifically Paris. There, women could wear men's clothing and not be judged. I'm thinking perhaps that might have appealed to her tomboy side. Virginia got a job with the State Department where she had several assignments in different countries because she knew so many different languages. However, she still had bigger hopes, like to do more, to help more. And she applied twice to be an ambassador She did excellent. She even got 100 on her language part of the exam, but she was still denied. One can only deduce that perhaps it was because she was a woman, to quote James Brown, this is a man's world. One of her assignments was in Turkey, and this was right after the big Wall Street crash, of course, and her father had lost even more money, so it gave him a heart attack, and then he later died. She had kept a gun that her father had given her for hunting, and one of those hunting trips while she was with her friends, she wasn't looking where she was walking. She tripped with her gun safety off and shot herself in the left foot at point blank. The doctors thought she was okay at first, and she went home, but then she started to get really, really sick, and then her foot started changing colors, and that was when they knew that she had gangrene. She was really, really, really ill. The only way to save her life was essentially to cut off the part of her leg that was just below her knee. So this is how that came to be.
Yeah, I was wondering what the origin story of her wooden foot was.
Yeah, literally shot herself in the foot. That sucks.
So I was gonna say when you were saying that she was in France because she could wear men's clothing, I was like, is that to hide the wooden leg or?
Oh, well, maybe now it is. Right after that. So a lot of people thought she was going to retreat back to Baltimore, kind of like lead a quiet life. You know, that's kind of like a devastating blow to someone who loved to be so active and out there. But of course, those people did not know Virginia and her strength of will. So let's talk about the prosthetic leg for un momento, at least what they used to look like back in the 1930s. We already established it was wooden, right? It was hollow, but it still weighed 7 pounds. It's not heavy, but essentially that's like a good-sized baby. I don't know if you've like long-term carried a baby, but no matter how cute the baby is, you're still, after a while, you're still like, can someone please take this baby for at least a little bit? So I can imagine that must have been pretty tough on her already.
How much does leg weigh normally? I don't think I've ever researched it, but I'm sure it weighs more than 7 pounds.
I guess the full leg it's got to be weigh at least more than twice that.
I think each one of my legs weighs at least 100.
No, you're so silly. You're so silly. I don't know. It's a good question.
But you know what? It's a hollow leg, so she could probably hide a gun in there or something.
Right. You stuff your weed in there. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's true. But also there was no soft silicone cushion at the end of the prosthetic, like I understand they have now. And then it was secured on with like these leather straps that like chafed her skin. She couldn't even flex her ankle, of course, when she was walking uphill. It was just really almost impossible to walk uphill for her. It was really challenging. She was pretty much in constant pain. And she called her prosthetic leg Cuthbert. Isn't that kind of cute? She named her prosthetic leg. I can kind of, well, not that I can relate to that, but I name like all my cars. So I was like, oh, she gave it a name. That's really cute.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of strange when you told me that.
I would imagine that's going to be most people's reaction. After the amputation, when life seemed like it was trying to early close the curtains on Virginia, she peeked her head back in and was like, wait, there's an act two. She told the State Department, don't count me out, basically. I'm going to come back to work. And where do you think her first assignment as a new amputee who couldn't really walk uphill comfortably was?
In France.
In Venice, Italy. Sad trombone. Where there are a crap ton of bridges that she has to walk up and down. Well, I'm sure down is not so much the hard part, but it was up. And her job did require her to travel throughout the city. But of course, she was determined to succeed. And you know what she did to fix the problem?
What?
She bought herself a gondola, dude. She was like, screw bridges. In fact, there are pictures of her standing on the back, just rowing the hell out of this thing with like a big smile. It was really cute. She always did have a friend with her that would help row and keep her balance. Essentially, what she was still doing was like answering calls, filing paperwork. This was still not really fulfilling to her. She felt stuck in a clerk job for the State Department. Although she did start to be known pretty well in the State Department for her dependability, and she was like a pretty good problem solver. So once again, she felt motivated to apply to be a diplomat, but again got denied. But this time, they told her it was because she was an amputee. So still sucks. Working for the State Department also allowed her to read memos on Hitler's rise in Germany. So she was really kept well informed in the political news. And this kind of got her thinking, if Hitler was going to start World War II, surely everyone, meaning like men and women, would be needed to help fight this really big fight. Thus, this could be where she could get her way in and do the more that she really wanted to help fight Hitler and his regime. This is probably a good time to take a quick commercial break. And then when we return, we'll get into like the real nitty-gritty spy shit.
This show is part of the Pro-Democracy Podcast Coalition. It's a group of over 100 podcasts that have pledged to spread the word about the state of American democracy. We're partnering with the nonpartisan group Represent Us to promote efforts to protect the freedom to vote and to pass laws that'll make our government truly inclusive. America's democracy faces urgent threats, but there are ways we can build a fairer path forward together. Visit represent.us/podcast to learn more.
All right, welcome back. Did you have a good break?
I did. The only thing that I miss about our old commercials is seeing you dance, seeing you do the little worm and everything, even though I do appreciate doing these commercials for our friends that represent us.
I know. I do too. I mean, they're not quite as moving and doesn't quite get you moving as much, but probably has a little bit more sustenance, more stuff in it, you know?
Definitely.
I'm sure we could always work in some dances after the recording of the show. I'm just kidding. Some Zoom dances. Just kidding.
So aside from not dancing, how was your break?
It was lovely. Just had a quick...
cigarette?
No, I don't. I don't smoke. I should clarify that for everybody. No. You know, I've never smoked a cigarette. I've never even had the desire. Not even an inkling.
God, what willpower.
No, it's not. I think it's willpower if you really want, like if you want the donut and then you like don't have the donut. But 9 out of 10 times I get the donut. But I've never had that. I never looked at a cigarette like a donut. Was that confusing?
I only think about cigarettes as donuts, but yeah, I also haven't smoked a cigarette in God knows how long.
Yeah, no, I applaud you. That's awesome.
Well, I mean, that's why I vape. Makes it a little bit easier.
Oh, yeah. Well, those are still wins regardless. I'm sure your lungs still thank you.
I appreciate you looking at the bright side.
Somebody has to. So getting back to Virginia.
Slims.
Virginia Slims. Isn't that a cigarette?
Yeah, it's a cigarette brand. Yeah.
Oh, geez Louise. See how it's all tying together. Getting back to Virginia Hall. So she said adios to the State Department after 7 years. Well, I don't know if she said adios. I mean, although she could have because she didn't know Spanish. But she basically was very like, thank you, next. And she went to work for the French Army, who basically was like taking anybody. And they needed someone to drive the ambulance. And she was like legit driving, hauling ass under heavy gunfire. But she had to get these dying men out of the battlefields. The ambulance was manual gear shift. Therefore, her leg really started to hurt after a while because she was pushing in that clutch with her left foot, which is the foot that was amputated. Right from that very first, like, hey, she wanted a little more and do more and help more. She certainly did. But she also learned a great deal. She learned how to splint bones, stop severe bleeding, and she learned CPR, et cetera, et cetera. It was pretty cool. Specifically in France, there was an order to stop driving because all the fighting was essentially over. So she kind of went to Paris for a little bit. She visited some old friends. She still saw a lot of the oppression that was still going on. And she knew that she had to get to London to continue the fight. Like she couldn't, in good conscience, just kind of like take it easy. So she went to Spain, got to London safely. And the podcast and the lecture seemed a little bit vague on who this man was to Virginia that she met that I'm about to talk about. But they did say that she had a brief, quote unquote, encounter, which could be as innocent as a chat, right? Maybe it was just a little chit chat. Or it could be as not innocent. And maybe they were like bumping uglies or something. I don't know, right? Either way, she met a man, George Bellows. He actually worked for SOE in London, and he gave her a phone number and said, kind of just very coyly, like, oh, call my friend if you're looking for some company in London. So she thought about it. January 1941, she called him. He turned out to be a senior official at Special Operations over there in the SOE and asked her to dinner. And she was basically recruited on the spot after she spoke of such, how she really wanted to make a change. And she just spoke with such resolve. And SOE, unfortunately, shared that same sexism, and her gender seemed to be an issue at first, but they still decided to take the gamble. This senior official was trying to infiltrate agents in France and still couldn't after 6 months of trying at that point. They needed to get the information, sabotage the Nazis, organize local resistant movements within France. Those were all like their hopes, right? Virginia learned to pick locks. She learned to encrypt messages so she could coordinate between the SOE and like French resistance leaders. Of course, this is all something that no one's ever done before. Like we said, he'd been trying for 6 months. So they really didn't know what to train her with, but they were like, well, we figured this is probably what you'll need. Paris had already fallen to Hitler. And in the lecture, they did say that it was kind of similar to trying to get an agent into North Korea today. Like, that's fucking almost impossible, if I think about it anyway. But she still volunteered with no hesitation and was like, I'll, put me in the game, coach, type of thing. Her cover for going into France was that of a journalist for the New York Post. She was really given a 50-50 chance of surviving, which is not really good odds. But the cover is really, really smart because she was able to ask questions without really throwing up any red flags. When she published her first article within a few days, they were even astonished that she was still alive. And this is actually how she got information out. She was basically encrypting or like kind of sending coded messages within an article. And it was all really important information. When liquor was sold, what days, just kind of important information so that when they would send in agents, they wouldn't blow their cover if they were asking for things that weren't being sold at that particular time. Thankfully, she was the type of person who could talk to anyone. She used her pretty face and her charm really well. And Virginia also reported that flattery goes a long way. Do you find this to be true?
Normally does, yeah. Although I think now that I'm a little bit older, I can kind of tell when people are bullshitting me.
What do you mean? That's funny.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they start off with, oh, you're so handsome, I know that they're bullshitting me, so.
Oh, no.
I see right through it, yeah.
It's those Instagram people that, like, fish you out of nowhere.
Yeah, all those catfishers, yeah.
Yeah. Here's a quick funny story about how I do know that flattery does get you a lot. When my daughter was younger, we were at a store and she saw, it was like a business Barbie or whatever. I don't know what her name was, right? But she had like a briefcase, she had glasses, like the full corporate gear getup. And my daughter asked for, of course, the Barbie, but then she adds, she looks like you. What? This sounded like all the flattery in the world to me, of course. So I had to buy it for her. But in hindsight, now that I saw it again, I'm like, oh, it's just because I had this same fucking dress and I probably had these heels too. So Virginia slowly started to recruit people from like all walks of life, police chiefs, to prostitutes, nuns, doctors. Her first great ally was a woman. Her name was Bertillon. And this lady had to review all the articles, just in case she had to censor certain things. So obviously flattery wouldn't work in this particular case. But as they got to talking, Bertillon was also on, the resistance side. And she gave Virginia a list of 90 people who also wanted to free France. So it was like an instant network of information, or of informants rather, all within a week of arriving. So you have to think about how charismatic, how persuasive and convincing she had to be to get all these people to join her, knowing that if they were caught, it was essentially like game over for them, right? It was very tanta. There's a disadvantage to every advantage, and this was no exception. On one hand, she was so charismatic, intelligent, so in charge that she was almost too memorable. And not to mention that she had fiery red hair, naturally. So if there's one thing a spy does not want to be, it's to be distinguishable to like so many people. She left one city for a larger city, Lyon, in East Central France, to establish another network of contacts who would join the resistance. She didn't have a radio operator, not even a radio to get information, but she was still able to be under the cover of a journalist. This time, though, when she went to register herself as a new resident, her hair color was different. It was a more muted, boring brown. Her papers were perfectly forged by the SOE with like fake names, which is kind of cool. This is like real spy shit we're getting into now, right? There were so many people fleeing the north that she was unable to find an open room to rent. Therefore, she actually had to stay in a convent for a little bit at the beginning. However, this ended up being to her great advantage as well, because these nuns were horrified by how awful the Nazis were being. And the convent actually became the very first safe house. Woo! Very cool. Now she needed more recruits to gather intel on the Nazis. And with every fake name that she actually had a different disguise. She would either wear glasses, specific hats, or she would have distinct mannerisms. No one ever realized that she was actually the same woman, even though she had different names. And then Virginia made a key contact at the American consulate, which finally meant she could get information in from London. SOE sent in about a dozen additional agents, finally. They would parachute in. This is crazy. And then they would also go in by boat, which is pretty wild. And then she also got radio operators to help. So she was finally getting real movement. The new agents received a message from another agent, Christoph. And Christoph said that he was captured like soon after his arrival, but he somehow miraculously like freed himself. And he was asking all the other agents to join him for like a mass meeting in Marseille. And it seemed like a little too fishy. Of course, Virginia was like, hard pass. And rightfully so, because what ended up happening is all these 12 additional people that she had received, they all got arrested except for Christoph. Fishy, right? At this point, now she's only one of 5 SOE agents in all of France, which really put her back. But confident in herself, she knew she could build up another network. After all, she did it once already, right? The network that she did end up building up included a brothel owner, sex workers. They themselves were hiding Jews, and they were putting their lives already on the line. So, of course, they would fit right in like helping organize the French resistance. Those ladies would drug the Nazis their drinks, get their lips all loose. And I'm talking about the men's real lips, you dirty birds. And they would also go through their pockets to gather all the information that they could. Others helping was the police chief of Lyon, giving her advance warning of every police raid. Like, she had really key people. Another person helping was the gynecologist doctor who saw the women at the brothel professionally. And this doctor, who also hid Jews, provided cards that basically said they had clean bills of health when some women actually had syphilis and gonorrhea to help spread it to the Nazis. And it was basically like, hey, anything to kind of take them out for a little bit at least. The doctor helped set up a mental asylum, which also doubled as another safe house. I mean, word started getting out that she could help agents out. She could get them money, get them to a safe house, basically what was needed. I mean, here's this American woman who they never were allowing to work, and she's like getting shit done, gathering intel, sabotaging Nazi plans. But it really wasn't easy for her all the time, because there were some men that just simply did not want to follow her lead. In the lecture, it mentioned that one man openly just asked her, "Why should I follow your orders?" So she was still a woman, and she still had to face that. And of course, he eventually came to respect her, but it's a little shitty that she had to deal with that. So some of these agents were caught, they were tortured, forcing them to talk. And then now the Nazis found out about the limping lady. So now kind of like she was somewhat known, maybe not necessarily a face, but they had like a very distinguishable characteristic. So when they heard it was a woman, nonetheless, they felt duped even more so. And then a woman with a limp, they were kind of made idiots. She evaded capture so many times. She was tipped off by all these awesome contacts. SOE asked her that if she was ready to come back after 3 months, because it was way longer than they thought she was going to be able to survive. But she still wanted to get those 12 men out of jail, and she did. They were all transferred to another jail, and she knew that she needed the help of the families to help bust them out of jail. She told one wife, to go to the bar by the jail, start chatting up a guard, kind of flirtatiously talk to them about like how she has a lot of money, maybe indicating like she could give a bribe. Well, he definitely took the bribe. This is how they could get messages in and out now. And they were able to get canned goods in and out. The cans were how they were able to cut up the can and fashion a key made out of this aluminum, which is crazy. A priest smuggled in a radio transmitter underneath his big robe. I mean, everybody was in on this. And it was all carefully planned out by her. And when it was time to break them out, one of the guards got the other guard super, super drunk. 3 a.m., the men used their key to start their escape. And they ran towards the barbed wire. Thankfully, they were wearing something to protect themselves to go through it. And all of them got out. Virginia had someone to pick them up there. And they drove to Spain, where they were at least free and clear. But then they still needed to make it to London. And thankfully, they did make it to London. Just that story alone, like busting all these men out of jail, does sound like it's straight out of a movie. I can absolutely see why this woman was so incredibly valuable as a spy, even though they didn't really want to give her that rank.
Yeah, that was pretty badass.
Right? So she started to be known for these genius jailbreaks. Other times she got people out by giving them sickness pills. And then they would be transferred to the hospital. And then that's when they would be busted out of the hospital. I mean, she had these like genius plans. Virginia did make a mistake by trusting one particular person, Alesh. He had really good information. It was really hard for her to say no. He had pictures and maps of Nazi coastal defenses. And, you know, she took the bait. He gave her fake information, unfortunately, and he took all of her important contacts. Everybody was pretty much made. Nazis were starting to march south, and she knew that there was really nothing she could do anymore because she couldn't get a hold of any of her contacts. Nobody was, like, tipping her off. So that night, she knew she had to get the hell out. So she got the last train. She took a tiny little small bag. Pictures were plastered everywhere of what she could look like in Lyon. And the only way for her to get out was to climb a huge-ass mountain through the Pyrenees. And it was 7,500 freaking feet.
Oh, man.
For a person with one leg, you know what I mean? And then, remember, she had a hard time going up. Like, this is fucking bullshit. And then it was in November when it was cold as fuck. So the climb itself would be awful for anybody. And then, incidentally, it was Friday the 13th. And she had to climb the whole thing sideways because she couldn't go up. You know what I mean? She had to kind of do it sideways.
And Jason was chasing her the whole time.
Jason with his crazy leather. How did you know? Just kidding. But, you know, her knee was throbbing. She still fucking miraculously made it through. Her fingers were blue. She was freezing. She said that was really one of the few times that she was really, really scared. But of course, she wasn't quite in the free and clear yet. She had to get on the train in Barcelona and make it to the embassy. She got on the train, but a Spanish civil guard saw her all disheveled and she looked all jacked up, right, Bodhicitta? And asked her for the papers. And of course, she didn't have anything because she didn't want to say. So they arrested her. They arrested her for being an undocumented refugee, which is kind of hilarious if you think about it, that she was caught, but they didn't even know who the heck they actually caught. Thankfully, she's the queen of jailbreaks, right? Her cellmate, a sex worker, got out. And of course, Virginia asked her to give a coded letter to the American consulate, which she did within a week. You know, they had already decoded the message. They had busted her out of jail. She was now finally on her way to Barcelona, and the mission was now in the past and now complete. And as wild as it sounds, she still wanted to keep working in the field. But SOE was like, no, one, you're too valuable, and two, you've already done like way too much.
Was Elizabeth Smith Friedman the person that decoded the message at the American consulate?
I wish it would. Wouldn't that be cool? That would be so cool. Worlds colliding. Yeah. She eventually went on to be the first woman in the CIA. So I thought that was another really cool thing. So she really never really stopped working in that particular field, but she just couldn't work in the field as a spy. She earned, I think, every medal pretty much. She got the MBE from King George, a Distinguished Service Cross from the American government, the only civilian woman to get this because, of course, the government didn't want to give her any real rank. It makes this gesture of the medals a little bit like it takes away from it. They're basically like as hollow as her wooden leg because she really didn't want the medals. She wanted to keep working. She wanted the title that she kept asking for, but was denied 3 times. President Truman thought it was so great that a woman would get the Service Cross that when he wrote to her, he asked her to do the ceremony in the Oval Office, like the whole 9, like pictures and, whatever. So she politely wrote back, no, thank you, because I still want to be a secret agent. And having a big ceremony would only make her face more well-known. The only witness for her ceremony when she got the cross was her mom. And at first, I kind of thought that it made me feel a little bit bad. Like, oh man, although she was surrounded and helping so many people, oh man, she didn't have anybody to share that with. Or so I thought. She did have a love in her life. It was one of the men that came actually a little too late to help commandeer the chateau while she was in France. His name was Paul. He was a French-American. She needed help fighting, and he had parachuted in a little too late. But, he still took her orders, had her back, and fell in love with her. He was a chef, which surely would not please Virginia's mom, because remember, Virginia's mom wanted her to marry up, so to speak. And Virginia had to hide her relationship with Paul for 12 years, which is really funny if you think about it, because she was fearless in the face of Hitler's secret police, the Gestapo, and she did all these things. But to tell her mom the truth, are you kidding me? That's loco. You got to be crazy to tell, she was afraid of her mom, but not like Hitler.
I thought you were going to say that her mom wasn't happy, but she sure was. He's a cook. How awesome is that?
I know. I guarantee you most people will agree with me. When somebody brings you food, I don't care if it's your waiter, they automatically get 2 points hotter just because they're bringing you food. You're like, yeah, they're definitely more good looking than they were when they didn't have the food. I'm just kidding. But Paul was younger than her. He was shorter than her, but he was really funny and he made her laugh. And, this is why they had a really good marriage, is what the people at the lecture had said. They did settle back in the U.S. She went on to work with the CIA, which was sadly not a really great experience because she had a desk job. She said that she didn't like her office job. And I'm thinking that because compared to all the other things that she had been doing before, how does she get to relate to those people? Was she trying to strike up conversations hey, isn't it the best feeling when you blow up a bridge? No? Damn. How come you, you know what I mean? It's got to be hard for her to know all the things she did and then kind of just being stuck behind a desk. She did eventually pass at the age of 76. There's a couple of books out there on her, and there's a movie in the works.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So tying it back to the Batman.
Tying it back to the Batman, exactly, to the movie. Before we go, we did get a very cool tweet by super friend Stephen B.
The Duke.
The Duke. It says, thanks for the podcast. Kept me entertained on my commute home tonight. The movie you were thinking of was Imitation Game, about Alan Turing breaking the Enigma code. But what happened to him after the war for the crime of being gay is a national shame. Thank you, Stephen. Yes, that was exactly the movie, and I couldn't remember it. Escaped my mind, and I completely agree. That's super disheartening to hear when any country makes that a crime.
Yeah, it's awful. Sounds almost like what's happening here in Texas with Abbott.
Yes, it happened in Arizona, too. They passed that there.
Oh, they did one in Arizona also?
Yeah, I mean, they're cut from the same sexist and fascist and just awful cloth. Well, congratulations, lovelies. You've done it again, folks. You've learned another interesting dinner topic about another woman who kicked a lot of ass with one leg. We hope you've been entertained by our chat and hope you join us again next week. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a review, tell a friend, subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast now. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter at GreetingsTAC. Email us at greetingstac@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 915-317-6669 if you have a story to share with us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.